Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest and learn with you today. Before I introduce you to our guest, here's a quote just for this episode. Knowledge has to be improved, challenged, and increased constantly, or it vanishes. Peter Drucker. Our guest today, a great steward of learning and the opposite of vanishing knowledge, friend of the Culture Matters podcast, through someone we deeply love on the show. Our dear friend, John Duffin, introduced me to this guest I can't wait to learn from. They have been a top athlete. Apparently, we're going to learn a little bit about, I don't, I don't want to say potential fight clubs or boxing arenas. They are an entrepreneur, a business advisor, consulting company, Summit Chasers Network, co-founder with, I believe, their significant other. I can't wait to learn about that. And you have a great podcast, Summit Chasers Network. And yeah, thanks for coming on the show today, Zach Carlin. Yeah, I almost forgot to say your name, brother. I'm excited for this.
Details. No, I really appreciate you having me on, Jay. And any friend of John is a friend of mine, and I've listened to a few of your podcast episodes. They're really great. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. I want to unpack this in the process of your organization because we have a lot of entrepreneurs, small businesses. When I was preparing, listening to the show, what was the inspiration behind? So we talk about the four P's in this. Is there an order to them? Purpose, principles, people, process. If I have the order correct,
Mhm.
what was the inspiration behind that, and why should that be important for our listeners that are business owners to take a look at?
It's the foundations of what makes any sort of successful, and it's not even. I don't believe, and the older I get, I don't believe it's only the foundational pieces to a successful business. I think it's the foundational pieces to a successful community, family, organization, group, town, whatever it is, country in some ways, is those four P's. It's the foundational pieces that oftentimes get, I don't want to say forgotten, but maybe forgotten or not focused on, especially as you grow, especially as you get a little bit older, your focus changes. You got a lot going on. If you're talking about business specifically, there's a lot of noise out there, right? There's marketing tactics with AI out there right now, with economic changes and political confusion and that type of stuff. It's really easy to get lost in that noise, and then we often forget those principles. It's sticking to, understanding what your purpose is, having a set of guiding principles that help in your decision making and consistent decision making. And obviously uh, none of that is capable of running smoothly if you don't have the right people around you. So
Hmm.
obviously you follow all consistent process, because consistency is king when it comes to a lot of aspects of business. So
For our listeners that are uh, intrigued by the idea of purpose, but may not know where to start, how do you
mhm.
take that from concept or abstract to practical? Like, where would one start with getting clear on their purpose?
Oh, that's a good question. Getting clear on their purpose. I don't think it's as deep of a concept as I think people want to make it out to be. Like purpose, individual's purpose could be, what do you care the most about? I mean, it's this simple. This is how I kind of discovered it. What stresses you out the most, right? Like what's on top of your mind? What are you willing to get less sleep to focus on or to fix? What type of sacrifices are you willing to make for certain things? You can go back, and everybody has a pool of proof that they can pull from if they're intentional about it, from their past, from their experiences, from positions that they put themselves in, on what their real purpose is. All of us have books that we've written up until this point. Our books may not be done, but we all have, most of a book or some of a book that has been written. And if you go back and read through those pages, you'd be really surprised what you can pull and what you could find, as far as being pretty obvious what your purpose is. What are you most passionate about? And again, what are you willing to make those sacrifices um, towards or for?
Hmm.
But I don't think it's, everyone likes to make this big, profound, complicated thing. They go have to read like 20 self-help books to find what their purpose is, right? Like we have, you just go back and read the pages of your life up until now and do it with intention.
What role does sacrifice play, if at all, in the purpose conversation?
So what are you willing to sacrifice for? So,
Hmm.
if you have kids, if you have, a passion or a problem that, and a lot of it comes from, a problem that they've faced or their family has faced or their community has faced, whether it's directly or indirectly. And it's something that you are so, like, you are willing to make sacrifices. You are willing to, take some things away from yourself, from your own comforts to fix, to do something about, to learn more about. Uh, so I think that it's what are you willing to sacrifice? And I think
Oh.
and if you were to compare, I'm willing to sacrifice X for X, and then I'm willing to sacrifice X for Z. I think you'll get a pretty good kind of data set of like, oh wow, I'm willing to, like, I'll lose sleep over this thing. Like I'll be late. This is a extreme example, but I'll be late picking up the kids once in a while to do this thing or whatever it is, or I won't be late, to pick up the kids for this thing. And again, we have a pool of proof of what we are and what we aren't innately passionate about. And again, what we are willing and not willing to sacrifice is a big data point for that.
Is it the thing that we're willing to sacrifice for is an accountability anchor to us?
Exactly.
And
Mhm.
that brings us, that thing may be closer to our purpose.
Exactly. Or at least it might not be directly the thing, but it may be, again, it's a clue. It's a concept of it, or it's a beginning piece of it. Right. And again, you talk to business owners, and I had a good live episode with somebody yesterday, actually, and he was kind of walking through his different businesses that he had, and his second business, although he was very excited about the possibilities of it being something that's successful, he quickly realized that it's not something that he's passionate about because he wasn't willing to pivot again. He wasn't willing to go through that pain. He wasn't willing to go through to do the sacrifice, to commit to the sacrifice that it takes to pivot his business to make it ultimately successful. And he realized, okay, this isn't innately what I guess I'm passionate about. I need to find what I am passionate about. And now that he has, he's like, it's so much easier to pivot, to make the hard decisions,
Hmm.
because this is something that I'm passionate about. And I'm willing to make those sacrifices for. So.
Principles that, what, how would you separate principles from values, or are they synonyms in your estimation,
I
or
would. Yeah.
corollary? Like yeah. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on the
Well,
values?
principles are more the tangibles, right? I think they kind of get misconstrued, and maybe there is multiple definitions of principles, right? But in my mind, I see principles as guiding policies, guiding principles for decision making. So you could have principles to where a value would be something like over deliver, like we over deliver. You have a set of guiding principles that answer, okay, how? We say that our value is over deliver. We over deliver for our clients and our customers and whatever, for each other. But now we need a set of guiding principles that answers the how do we do that. So, having radical open-mindedness, or we don't move on from a decision unless everybody involved with having to execute upon the decision is in the know, is communicated to. Like that would be an example of like a guiding principle, so to speak, because it allows you to fulfill and answers the question, how do we
Hmm.
fulfill this core value that we say that we have? It's kind of like walking the talk, so to speak.
Have you, yeah, in the absence of that clarity, what happens to those values?
They just don't mean anything anymore. They're just
The
fun.
valueless values. Like that.
There's just fun. It turns into what unfortunately most core values in businesses turn out to be, which is just call them Sunday words that you put up on the hallway.
Oh.
Just
What
don't
do
mean
you
anything.
think? Yeah, have you found that business? I'm curious what you find business owners uh, that you're engaged with constantly. What are some of their misnomers around having accountability from business advisory, from coaching? Some of the misnomers, some of the
Mhm.
myths that aren't true.
Yeah, I would say a lot of them around consulting and advice. I think that some of them are true, to be honest. I think a lot of like the most popular ones I would say are true. Like I don't we try to actually stay away from saying that we're advisors or consultants and that kind of thing, because a lot of what happens, and I see this a lot with through my own education and working with my own mentors and consultants and advisors and those types of things, is they take what has worked over here and then try to apply it over here, as opposed to taking how we found what works over here and then applying that principle over to here. So it's that they focus on what has worked, not how we found out what worked. So then you get a lot of these companies that come in and then they've worked with other advisors and stuff before, and they're like, yeah, I read their book and it was great, but when we went to go implement this, template style strategy protocol, or the VTO or whatever it is, I always talk bad on traction and like the VTO and that kind of stuff, but I love EOS, so I'm not saying anything about it else bad about them. I'm not. But they take these cookie cutter templates and then try to frameworks,
Yeah.
try to implement them over here, and they just don't work. They're different industries, sometimes different markets. Your team has different skill sets. You have different strengths that you need to leverage in different ways. You have different reasons for your current success and different reasons for your current downfall, or not like adverse success. So a lot of these consultants and stuff, they aren't. A lot of them have MBAs and they look good. Right, their LinkedIn accounts look great. They use a lot of good words, but then they go to implement some of these frameworks and it's hard for them to think outside the box. It's hard for them to solve problems through critical thinking because they haven't innately been in the trenches as much, I would say. So we kind of try to stay away from
Hmm.
the fact that we are consultants. Like we're more partnerships. Like we do a lot of consulting for equity. Like we're in there with them, right? Like a lot of our portfolio companies that we work with, like I'm helping them develop the processes and stuff by doing some of the fulfillment for them or with them and that kind of thing. So I think that would probably be I think probably be the
Hmm.
biggest one, is cookie cutter things that have worked in other companies and not focusing on how did we figure this thing out that worked and then applying those principles over.
What are some of the attributes that are very clearly a business owner that's listening? They might be in a state where they're making a lot of mistakes right now, but they won't feel it for 6 months or a year.
Mhm. What are some attributes of
Maybe attributes, not the right behaviors or rituals or tendencies. You can
I
go
think
attribute,
I
character
think that's
attributes.
it. I think that's it. And it's interesting. That's an interesting concept to kind of break down because and we kind of go into like business strategy and looking at your gain to operating functions and that kind of stuff. So if you're especially if you're a small to medium sized business owner, I think that a lot of the founders or business owners, whether they've been there since the beginning or not, they tend to go into this kind of status quo mode and like this assumptive mode where you have a lot of, they call it like whether it's inertia by proxy or inertia by culture or just ignorance, whatever it is, and they're just kind of coasting. They're not looking at the markets as much. They're not looking at some of their ins and outs of their own company. Because I've talked to companies where they're going through that they want to sell and they're going through kind of an M&A process right now, and they're looking at their valuations and like, you guys are so cash positive. Why are you guys doing so well? And they're like, yeah, well, this is just how we do things, or we have a good whatever, we have good branding, or we have good little repeat customers, whatever it is. And then you actually learn a little bit more about their company. It's like because your customer service is so much better and you're competing with other companies that are franchised, so their customer service isn't as friendly, doesn't have that personalized touch. It doesn't, like, that's why you're successful. So you see a
Mhm.
lot of businesses that don't even know why they're successful, and then when they're failing adversely, they don't know actually why they're failing. They see, okay, I've done this before because I worked with a lot of sales leaders, so we did a lot of like sales audits and that kind of stuff. I think, oh, our revenue's dipping, we're having inconsistent revenue, and we're starting to drop below, where we're starting to perform worse than the market, where we used to just kind of fall along the market. Well, okay, our sales sucks, right? It's this uh, fluff, surface level approach, right? And it could be because it's just the easiest one for them to look at. It
Yeah.
could be have a bias towards sales, or they've had issues in the past, and that's where the problem was. Instead of doing a true critical point analysis, figuring out where the actual root cause is, and then starting there, they choose the easier route, which is surface level, or they just don't look at all and they wait too long. They just don't bother. They blame it on something else. And I think where they kind of start to get into trouble is when they wait for the warning signs to get too loud before they start looking for these kind of critical points. Things are moving too fast now. Even and I worked with a lot of companies that are in like the home improvement, construction, real estate, and they were typically in what you'd call like classical market environments where they were very predictable. They could you could plan 5 years ahead, and your forecasting be
Going
fair,
up.
right? You could. And sorry, we're gonna say something?
No, because it was going up.
Yeah, it was exactly. It was just, but they could tell because you look at economics and you could look at past history, and you could just tell like it was more forecastable. Those are classic environments, and in those environments, you win by being big or having just an isolating mechanism that would cost too much for your competitors to capture, and that's just how you won. So that you're looking at these markets, but now you're looking at all these sub-markets within these markets, and they're moving a lot faster. So, for example, you get a company I worked with, they're in the home improvement industry, and they would do shingles, roofing, and windows. And so they're in a fairly classic environment. They're a little bit smaller, so they had some competition, but it was still the big one. You win by scale. However, a lot is changing in other certain verticals of their business. So lead capturing, marketing, software, like internal software is changing. Project management software is changing really, really quickly. So the market itself, if you looked at it from a 30,000 foot view, it looks like, okay, it's not changing too much, right? We can, strategically, we can kind of look 3 to 5 years out and make incremental changes and be okay. But now you got their competitors that are there's a lot more software available in the industry now that's constantly improving. There's lead aggregators that are getting more and more prominent. Their technology and their softwares and their strategies are becoming a lot more robust, a lot more pointed. So you're starting to have to compete in different sectors of your own business differently. You're starting to have to strategize in different sectors of your business differently, where you would take an overall a classical strategic approach to the industry, but now you have to have a more adaptive and visionary approach to your sales and lead capturing and lead generation and that type of stuff. So if you wait too long and don't get ahead of these types of changes, these industry changes in specific verticals of your business, like you're going to fall behind, and it's really hard to catch up when you've fallen behind.
Mm.
It's really hard to kind of claw your way back anymore. So it was a really long way of saying, look for the problem before you hear anything or smell anything or taste anything of that would be associated to a problem.
What type of leadership dynamic is going to lead to that? Or yeah, have a higher likelihood of that because it sounds like self-awareness.
Yeah. Oh, 100% self-awareness. And also it's funny. His last name's Graham. I can't remember his first name, but he had recently coined a term, founder mode. Have you heard of that? It's where well, there's founder mode and then there's like manager mode. And a lot of business owners, right, they get to a certain point, they go to manager mode, which is just status quo. Keep things going the way it is. Right? We have our standard operating procedures, everything's running smooth. We've been profitable for a few months or a few years. Let's just ride this out, which is fine in some cases. Most cases anymore, it's not. You have to be able to, as a leader, as a business owner, and even a number two, number three in the company, you have to be able to shift between this founder mode and manager mode. Founder mode being more experimenting, always learning, getting in the weeds. And I'm not saying micromanaging, but be there, in the weeds intermittently with different sectors of your business, and constantly looking for things that could be, whether it's incrementally or more so improved, looking for opportunities, looking for different strengths that you can create, then therefore leverage. But it's constantly kind of being in it, not micromanaging. This is not an excuse to be a dick, but being in there, understanding what's going on both in the market externally and internally in your business. So you have to be able to switch that on and off. You have to be able to go between both, that kind of that founder mode. How can we improve what is breaking or what could break in the future comparative to threats and opportunities externally, and then sitting back and kind of taking a 30,000 foot view and being like, okay, how is everything going? Letting them kind of run.
What are some of you've talked to a lot of business owners in your tenure, reasons they believe they started their businesses?
Ooh, what are the reasons they believe they started their businesses?
Yeah, like I envision, like if you've had so many conversations with so many different founders and or in the founder mode or manager mode in your tenure, right? Like
Mm-hmm. It's
What are
very
some of
so
the
much.
reasons they believe they started their businesses?
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
some that stick out.
it varies so much. The most successful ones, the ones that again are willing to make those sacrifices and kind of push through those difficult times, make the difficult decisions, they're the ones that made them for more profound, internally motivating decisions. So that same company I'm talking about, they started their business because their small town in the South, Arkansas, got taken over by meth. It was there was a big lumber mill that kind of employed the town. It went out of business and then in moved a lot of drugs. So their motivation was to bring prosperity and jobs back to the town, which they've done fairly successfully. They've put in like their manufacturing plant is there now, and they employ quite a few people from that area. So that they got to where they are successfully because and they've overcome the things they want to overcome. I innately because I believe they had that very
Mm,
basic anchor point, right? A reason to get up in the morning sort of thing when they don't innately want to. Now, the ones that expand past that, because there are companies that grow beyond that, because again, that's a small town, it's very narrow. If they wanted to expand past that, then they're going to have to find another reason to kind of to move past that because it's easy to get complacent. But the ones that again even move past that point, I think just fall in love with building, with fall in love with creating, with fall in love with almost leaving their mark. Like I just read a great Mark Randolph's book, That Will Never Work. He's one of the
oh,
original co-founders of Netflix. And his the kind of and his co-founder Reed Hastings, everybody knows, a lot of people know about him as kind of being the more front man co-founder of Netflix. But Mark Randolph himself, he knew that I just want to build stuff. Like I want to find something that's not there. I want to create it. I want to make it profitable. That's what he loves to do. But Reed wanted to change the world. Reed he wanted to like and not just in the entertainment industry, he wanted to change educational reform. He wanted to make big impacts in those types of places. So he attached
well,
the success of Netflix to the success of that dream. Now they don't need to be innately created, but the success of one can allow you to be at least more likely to succeed, have a bigger impact in the other. So it's attaching that success to something bigger, even if it's not directly correlated. Like with Reed, he wanted to change education, and he still, I believe, donates a lot and supports a lot in the education reform space. And but it's being able to attach it to something bigger. But again, and that's okay if you don't. If you just want to if you want to help out your community, and then that's the type of business that you want, great. Just don't just don't let your business become something else because you're going to be miserable and you're going to wake up one day and be like, why do I have so many locations? Why I'm stressed out. I never wanted to be this type of CEO. And then you get those are a whole bunch of other problems. So
without, throwing people on the spot or naming names per se, are there narratives that stand out for those businesses that are the most common to fail of
yeah,
reasons they started or
yeah, no, there's I had somebody on the podcast, the Summit Success Series. Those are live on Thursdays. Her name's Amanda, and I actually worked with her a few years ago now. And she says that I started this thing and it got successful out of nowhere because it followed a trend that was peaking at the time, but it wasn't in line with what I truly was passionate about and wanted to do. And I rode that train to success because I thought that's what somebody who wants to be successful does. And then she tried to kind of mold that current successful business into what she wanted to do, and they innately didn't have much to do with each other. They wouldn't have been a good bolt on. It wasn't strategically, it just wasn't a good kind of segue. Uh and it led to the failure of the business. She ended up having to close shop and let everybody go and that kind of thing and start all over again. um so a big one is those that aren't really clear on truly, is this where I want to go, or am I just following a trend right now?
mm,
Some, especially in the tech space, that's okay because then you have the option. I'll just get it to a certain point, then I'll sell it, and then I can use that money to fund what I want to do now. So there's no black and white, right or wrong answer. But if you want this to be your one and done business where you succeed, take to the bank, put your kids through school with, and donate to a cause and that kind of thing, then it has to be something that's in line with at least with what you could see yourself sacrificing for long term.
So do you think there's a relationship between the clarity of the vision and the individual's ability to sacrifice, which has an influence over whether people are going to follow them, that being customers
Mhm.
and or employees?
Big time, big time. I think it's probably one of the bigger, and I mean, there's like their skills and the their experience and their ability to bring people around them and raise capital, and there's all those kind of more hard skills. But for them to kind of say go the distance, it's being super, super clear on what they want it to, at least what they want their life to look like.
What's your philosophy on an external partner like yourself? It is the person listening that is resonating with, hey, that's me right now.
Mm.
Is part of their anecdote to bring individuals like yourself on to help them become clear on that, or to give it to them? Or what's your philosophy around that?
I mean, I don't think anybody can do. I mean, nobody who's greatly successful has done it alone. The stories, the headlines, the quotes, and that kind of stuff. It might look like it, but nobody's done it alone. Like even Steve Jobs, he had to leave Apple and come back. He needed that time in between for Apple to be what it is now. And he needed the mentors and people around him, especially when he was younger, to get to where he was. There's tons of examples of that. Mark Zuckerberg, he had tons of mentors and stuff growing up. Sorry, coming up with Facebook. They're having that person, and it's not always going to be the same person. Like I'm well aware somebody will come and work with us when they're 1 to 5 million, $10 million company, and then we get them to 100 million. We're very aware that that's not us anymore to be the one to help them, right? But you do need that that third party objective, somebody that can question you, somebody that can hold you accountable, that's not involved directly in the business, that doesn't have, a huge stake in it, that's lost in the weeds with you, so to speak. Because I mean, what's the point of having somebody with you if you're, navigating through the forest if you're both lost? I mean, it's not, there's no point. You want somebody in the airplane overhead that's, guiding you and that kind of thing. That's just as it just is no one will ever be as invested in your success as you are. If anybody says that, they're just gaslighting you. But somebody who is second most invested in your success is, I guess, you and your business are.
Hmm. Um, I'm curious about the what your philosophy is around exits.
Mm.
Like, when would a listener that's engaged, in their business start preparing for a sale? What are some of the, pros of that? Some of the cons or things to look out for that it'd probably be less costly to learn it from you than go through
Yeah.
it themselves.
Yeah, and that's a big focus that we have with a lot of our clients. Is it's not necessarily that they all want to exit or they want to sell, but looking at your business's makeup and success from like a valuation perspective, is really, really valuable. But I mean, it depends why you're wanting to exit. If you're wanting to exit by proxy because you want to, you need to, you're seeing the writing on the wall. This isn't what I want to do. I need to get out of here. Um, then obviously earlier the better, because if you wait too long, then your business isn't going to be valuable, right? It's going to start to plummet. It's not going to be valuable. So then you just lost your options to be acquired and sell, or just sell, in general, and getting any of your money back. Because ideally, you will start a business because you're investing. It's an asset. You want to be able to get some money out of it. Um, but so if you wait too long, you're just not going to, or you're just going to get pennies on the dollar type of thing. Um, so it's always looking at whether it's something you're passionate about or not, or that it's not going to be your thing forever, setting it up from the beginning so that it is valuable. So that's processes and systems. Can it run without, look at your top two layers if it's big enough, looking at your top 1 to 2 layers of leadership. If you were to erase them, would the business be able to run efficiently without you? Do you have proof of proof of consistent profit, right? So if you're looking like this, over the years, it's you're just not going to be as valuable. If you don't have like get as many, they call them like isolating mechanisms as possible. So that's, patents, uh, uh, competitive advantages that are hard for your competition to replicate. Get as many of those as possible. And when I say hard to replicate, I mean it would be too costly for them to try to compete with you in that one space or to gain the product or service to the same caliber as you. It wouldn't be fiscally responsible for them to do that. So get as many identify and create as many isolating mechanisms as you can, something that's very unique to you guys. Have a very clear differentiator. All those types of things make your value go up significantly. So having as much of that early on as possible. And there's one thing about it, everyone's like, well, we have a competitive advantage because we have this software, we do things in this certain way. Well, things move really fast, so you don't have a competitive advantage unless you have a means to improve it over time and consistently. So you have to have a way for these, and then a path. Okay, we have this competitive advantage. Here's how it's incrementally improved over time, and here's our plans for it in the future to keep it as a competitive advantage.
Mm.
And software is a big one. Like that just moves so fast. Uh, like Apple announced that they had, they're attaching an AI to their Siri model, and then Google came out with Gemini like right away. Like you always have to have a means to improve upon it and then keep it kind of ahead of the game, ahead of your competition. Um, at least make it easily improved upon, or else it's just not a competitive advantage, it's just something cool you have right now. So those are kind of like sort of simpler ways, to increase your valuation. It's also then there's looking at, future kind of potential of the business as well. Where if it's a business that's easily pivoted into something else, or it has history of being malleable, being able to change as the market changes, the needs of the market change, being able to pivot and make those adjustments. If you have proof of that, that bodes well as well. So there's lots of ways you can kind of look at how can I, over time make my business more valuable, and looking at it from that perspective, as you can probably tell. I mean, it is innately valuable for a business owner because again, you never know, things might change. You got parents that live abroad or something like that, and then one of them gets sick and you want to be able to go and stay with them. You're like, okay, I want to exit this. You want to be able to get, you want to be able to get a pretty good multiple out of it. So get more money out of it. So it's thinking it from that lens from the beginning is super important. And whether you're in a big company, a small company, you're in tech, you're in construction, or whatever it is, it's a good lens to kind of look at.
You were operating in retail prior to partnering with businesses, correct? Like
So I
in
was
the
in
gym space, in the fitness industry?
yeah, I was in the health and wellness space before that. Yep.
What, if at all, lessons or advantages you think you garnered from that space that have been very valuable to being more
Sales.
broad in different verticals and
Yeah, sales, dealing with people. Um, that was it's interesting because it's kind of almost a look down. I don't know if it has much anymore, but it's almost a look down upon industry for some others, right? Just because it's the barrier
really?
to yeah, the barrier to entry seemed it's a little bit easier. It's there's a lot of misinformation through it. There's a lot of noise. Like if you look at all like the fitness influencers online, and there's so many different types of supplement brands out there, and the regulations on said supplements are just bizarre, like the proprietary blends and blah blah blah. There's a lot that kind of goes into it. And it's just seen as like a more of a vanity industry, right? But it again, now having worked with in a ton of other industries, it was probably mm, I would still pick it as like my foundational industry to come up in. One, because of sales. You think about what you're selling. If I'm selling a software, or if I'm selling Windows, or if I'm selling gutters, or if I'm selling whatever it is, a service, I have proof of you do this, you will get this outcome. You will make this much more money. You have a house that you want to invest in, right? You put these windows in it, you put this roof on it, you put these gutters in it, it could increase the value of your house and your heating bills and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's something that you can like attach it to that will happen, and there's tons of proof that it will happen. In the fitness industry, most of it's just hearsay, and a lot of it is like you're selling of them to do a bunch of work and to be really uncomfortable and to say no to a lot of things that they love, food. Um,
Huh.
and with the increased likelihood that they might achieve what they want to achieve, right? So, hey, I want to get a six. Somebody comes in like, hey, I want a six pack. I'm going to Belize in 3 months, and you're like, okay, all right. What have you tried before? What hasn't worked? What has worked? A lot of times they have no idea what has worked or what hasn't worked. just because it's not something that a lot of people are really educated on. And they're like, okay, if you show up to the gym 5 days a week, you follow, this particular plan, you might do it. You're like, I might. What do you mean? Well, everybody's body is different. You're a little bit older now, or maybe you're younger. You're going to react a little bit different. You got genetics that are either for you or against you. There's a lot of factors, right? You might get hurt, or you might not, whatever it is. There's a lot of factors. So having to learn how to sell in that environment in sales was probably I would always choose that as like my foundation for sales, and even in business as well. So I had 6 brick and mortar health and wellness facilities, and that was it was a great space to learn basics of business, like profit margins and diversification, and what do I kind of pick as my economic driver? How do I even determine if we are successful? If I just look at memberships, that doesn't really mean that we're successful. If I just look at sales of supplements and that kind of stuff, that doesn't really innately mean that we're being successful. So it's understanding, okay, if an economic driver be, okay, what's our profit per square footage, and how do I even calculate that? What does that even mean? How do I increase it? Blah 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 blah. Like it was a really good kind of foundation for business in general. And you're dealing with pretty tight profit margins and that kind of stuff as well. So learning efficiencies and the diversity of people that you're working with too is just bonkers. You're part therapist, part business owner, part trainer, part equipment designer, all these types of things. So yeah, I think it was I wouldn't choose any industry as like my foundation, I think.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, you founded Summit Chasers Network with your wife, is that correct?
Uh Fiance, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
A lot of our listeners are in business with their spouse, whether they realize it or not. What advice do you have for them and how to grow? And selfishly, I am with my wife.
Hey, no, that's a really good question. It's it's interesting. So we have our relationship, I would say, would be different than I don't want to say most. I don't want to assume that I know everybody's relationship, but we're both pretty equally obsessed with what we do. So, however, we took that for granted, I think, at the beginning, where we thought, okay, we're both obsessed with this, like this is what we want, this is what we love doing, blah 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 blah. So we were like, okay, it's okay if we spend a lot of our time together doing this, and that's okay. Well, we found out that we still need to make time being the boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance's husband, wife. We
Yeah.
had to put time in that mindset because it's very different needs that you're fulfilling, right? So it's even though even if you both are equally obsessed with the success of the business or what you're doing in the business or whatever it is, you got to make time to not be those people. You need to put on the other mask, put this mask down, put the other one on, and go and have your date nights and that kind of stuff. And then even if you throw kids in the mix too, it's even more important. Because now, even though you love what you're doing, it's still stress. It's still a weight that gets put on your shoulders. And then if you add kids onto that, and a deal doesn't go through, or something just doesn't work out the way you want it to work out, whatever it is. I mean, that puts a lot of strain on it. Even though you both are obsessed with it, it's a different dynamic. It's a different relationship dynamic. So always having that kind of anchor point to kind of bring yourselves back to, why you're together in the first place, sort of thing, is really, really important. Really, really important.
What do you think are some of the clear advantages?
Ooh, that's I mean, we're always business meetings, ad hoc business meetings are really quick. 'Cause we're right there. Honestly, that would be a big one because I've been at my previous agency, even though we did end up getting an office together as entrepreneurs. I get most of my good ideas when I'm laying in bed at like 2 o'clock in the morning or in the shower or whatever it is, just driving, right? They're not always available. So to have somebody like we can just always we can go from talking about whatever we're going for dinner, date nights, talking shit to each other, whatever it is, to one of us gets an idea and then it was just right there. Like that
Yeah.
is really nice because sometimes sometimes those ideas are fleeting. So to be able to get them and just talk through them right away, is that's a Actually, this is a good because I didn't see it as like as much of an advantage as maybe I do now that I'm explaining it. But yeah, no, it's a pretty good little cheat code.
Yeah, well, like, do you think it had any impact on your speed? Because you guys have grown so quickly.
Yeah, well, big time, big time. Also, yeah, and our ability to adjust, our malleability, it makes a big difference. Big difference. And also our ability to figure out what to not do, I would say is the bigger one, because then we can talk through it right away. And
Yeah.
even though a lot of things like you get an idea, even though it's not maybe not the greatest idea, but if I didn't have that, if I didn't have her right there to break that down, we might not have used it anyways. However, we got to talk through why it wasn't a good idea. What are some other good ideas that could maybe sprout out from it and that kind of thing. So you get it's all those little things, even though it's like it might make it like a 0.5% improvement or whatever it is, maybe just change wording in an email. Those add up a lot over time. And you have, a couple of hundred of those types of conversations a year as opposed to 50 times a year. It makes a big difference.
Do you think it adds to the value of the client's experience? And I
Yeah,
ask because there's a patriarchal and a matriarchal energy.
yeah. I definitely think that's a good question. I think, I mean, definitely, I think the easy answer is yes. It definitely does. Um, but yeah, I definitely think it does. That's a good question. I think it does, just
Because
because
you're there's inherently an accountability mechanism, being that you're
yeah.
outside of your partner.
Mhm.
You're not in it literally, but in your explanation, you are culturally.
Yeah,
It sounds like some of your value, principles are service and
yeah.
be in the trenches with your
Yeah,
partners.
no, 100%. And the reason I'm hesitating is because I'm trying to think of ways that maybe where it wouldn't help, because sometimes changing too much and having too many ideas that you get to think through and you know sometimes that can be a detriment. But I can't think of where it has. So I would say definitely more so it is a big positive. And again, the changes get to make quicker. We get to think through and talk through and bounce ideas off of each other a lot quicker. So again, that just kind of fosters improvement.
This show that you have three. Where can people listen to this? And then, what is it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. No, if you would have asked me like 3 weeks ago, what is it? I wouldn't have been able to answer you as well now. But so I do 3 live shows a week, and then plus we have a pre-recorded podcast. Um, and there are 3 different shows innately. The ones on Tuesday is called The Founders Focus. It's much more tangible, tactical business, education, that kind of thing. We're focusing a lot right now on like strategy implementation, the difference between good and bad strategy, how to kind of create what we call a summit strategy core that helps you kind of guide your decision makings uh, when you're developing a strategy and you're developing strategic objectives. Um, so that one's more like the tangible business advice and content. And then the Thursdays is the Summit Success Series. That's a little bit more about the mindset, a lot more about the mindset actually, about what it takes to find that success, what it takes to push through, whether it's mental habits that aren't serving you, um, develop skills, soft skills, leadership, that kind of stuff. So it's much more the mindset stuff on the Thursdays, and then Saturdays is my fun show. It's called the Summit Coffee Club. We actually just got a sponsor for that one. Shout out to Shop Floor Coffee. Um, that's one where we talk. The whole premise of it is, there's enough stuffy webinars out there. We don't need another one. So this one's a lot more. We play games. Like one we're gonna have I have some friends that'll come on and past podcast guests that'll come on and we'll play games. Like one was what would it be like to work for these fictional characters? So I was like, what would it be like if the Terminator was your boss? Or what would it be like if Fred
Huh,
Flintstone was your maybe stuff like that. But we're still like business focused, but we're trying to have more
that's
fun with
cool.
it. And it's fun because they incite some interesting introspective conversations sometimes as well. And then we have our Summit Chasers podcast.
That's philosophical. Where did you come up with that?
I don't know. I don't know. We just started doing it. We
And
just
it's like
I
other business advisors come in and
Yep.
it reminds
Yeah.
me of philosophy class. Like, what would Aristotle say about this? Or
Yeah, it's
what does
I
John Locke think about this topic?
it's
I
really
love that.
interesting what insights like what insights important conversations. And sometimes it's not just us sitting here asking questions. It's let's find out like what would happen if, what would you delegate to Deadpool? Like that kind of
Huh.
stuff. And then it's interesting the conversations that come out of it because you think of things in different ways. We get out of our biases, we get out of our straight line box thinking, like
Sorry.
we're in a tunnel all the time, and we start thinking outside the box. And it's been interesting. I get some extremely intelligent people on there, and we ask things in this type of way, and even they're like, "Oh, I didn't think of it like that. Like this has a lot of nuances." So it's a lot of fun.
And your podcast is Summit Chasers Network.
The podcast is just Summit Chasers Podcast, and then we have our YouTube channel, Summit Chasers Productions. You can find all these shows are on there. We go live. We go live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn.
And are you speaking at groups as well? If any of our listeners want to reach out for you to speak at in front of their organization
Yeah.
or on a stage, what
Mhm.
topic would it be specific and like?
Yeah. No, I've done quite a few. So I've done a few. Well, I did keynotes in my previous agency, but I don't. That was on like sales and leadership. I don't necessarily or sales leadership. I don't do as much on that anymore just because I wasn't passionate about it. Being consistent with what we're talking about. But we have a summit that we're hosting that's coming up October 19th in Toronto. It's called the Young Professionals Leadership Summit, and I talk a lot about like on like success principles, like going back to the principles concept, and why it's important that we all identify our own principles and are they serving us? If they're not, how can I adjust them and create that habit? Um, and the other one is on as kind of more of a that business strategy core. What's the difference between good and bad strategy? How can I look at my business a little bit differently? And that one's more of a workshop style. We actually have a little. Mind if I plug something real quick?
Sure, yeah, please.
So we have it's the premise of it. We have a 5 day, what we call a 5 day strategy core challenge. Actually, John's doing it. Um, and that's where it's 5 days. We keep it to only 10 business owners max. And we really challenge you, hence the word challenge, on looking at your business differently, identifying some of those strengths and weaknesses that we kind of talked about that a lot of business owners are blind to, identifying again your strengths, how you can leverage them, identifying your market, looking at your market differently, how can you leverage these strengths in your market, and looking at competition a little bit differently. And a lot of people when they come out of it, and we've done this in small groups before, when they come out of it they're completely shocked in how much they didn't understand their business and what could innately make it successful, why it was successful or why it was failing, and you make to allow you to make much clearer strategic decisions going forward. But that's kind of when I do a workshop, that workshop, it's based off that 5 day challenge. So if they wanted to, they could join the challenge, see what it's all about. It's 5 days, Tuesday to Saturday, Tuesday evenings, last one Saturday morning, and you can get a pretty good idea of what the workshop would be like.
I have my last question. What would Gord's principles be?
Gourds, you you did watch the episode. I was like, for a second,
Right.
I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, Gord, what would Gord's principles be? He was such a hard ass, man. So those of you that don't know, he was my very first boxing coach that helped me break addiction when I was around 17, 18 years old. Um, what would his principles be? He was so adamant because I mean, he served in the military in Canada, and he was a drug addict himself. He'd been in some really shoddy places, and he always was like, even if I screwed up, he's like, why'd you do that? Like, well, how are you going to do it differently next time? Like, take responsibility for it. Like, he was really, really big on like intentionally taking responsibility for things because he was so sick of feeling like he was a victim that he's
Wow.
like, "Hey, I need some control of my life, and I need to admit that I have control, and I need to put that into practice. In order to do that, I need to intentionally take responsibility for as much as I can, even if it's not obvious." And this is innately kind of what he said to me, a little bit more aggressively, but because I would give him excuses, and he's like, "No, like it's not the cops' fault. It's not these people's fault that don't whatever. It's not the drugs' fault. It was your choice to do all this stuff. You're the one that made the actions. You're the ones that put these things in motion. This is on you, and don't let it make you feel bad, and let that empower you to let you know that you have power. You have the power to change it and make better decisions moving forward, and you have control over your future and the outcomes of it." So he was really big on that. Even when we would be sparring and that kind of stuff, I'd always be like, well, he'd hit me. Yeah, he'd end up hitting me. He's like, why'd
Yeah,
that
you
happen?
boxed, right?
Yeah, yeah, he was my boxing coach, yeah, and he would be sparring and he would hit me, and he'd land a good one. He's like, "Why did it happen?" I was like, "I don't know. That left hand of yours is crazy." He's like, "Why do you care about my left hand? Well, how could you have avoided it?" Right? And then so it was like a lot of that. So that would be definitely one of his for sure. A big one of his for sure is intentionally take responsibility for everything. Um, I mean, he was old school, man. Yeah, that's funny you brought that up.
And I'd love to have you back. We
Yeah.
could maybe on part two go into your story. You have a profound story. Just yet so much actual knowledge. It's like we'll get to the biography later, kind of thing.
No, that makes sense. I appreciate that.
Yeah, if everyone listening to this show, where can everyone follow you, like in one place where it's best for them to follow you so they can really build a relationship?
LinkedIn, I'm all over LinkedIn. I mean, I'm a little bit on. I don't even know what the other ones are. YouTube, probably the other big one. We're mostly on LinkedIn and YouTube, but I'm on Instagram. On Instagram, it's the Nomad Coach. But on LinkedIn, it's just Zach Carlin. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, brother. This was really a pleasure. I'm excited and love to have you back. And if you're all listening to the Culture Matters podcast, please follow Zach Carlin at the Nomad Coach
Nomad Coach, yeah, on the
on
Instagram.
Instagram. And we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.